Hi, I'm Kevin Warner. I'm a pastor on the south side of Des Moines at Lighthouse Community Church. And this is my brother, Sean. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Kevin.
Hi.
Thanks for
um,
doing
yeah, you're welcome. We're recording this to talk about coffee because we both love coffee. Um, Sean, you've been in Honduras now for how long?
6.5 years. Yeah, 6.5 years.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk about coffee here because you got into coffee while being in Honduras. So kind of tell us the story a little bit of how you got into the coffee business.
Yeah, so I mean, you and I've kind of talked a bunch about. We always had lots of fun talks about theology or whatever it may be. So as I've gotten into coffee, I had a lot of good talks about coffee and some of the interesting aspects of the coffee industry. And because I got into coffee about 4 years ago, um, I was in Honduras. My wife and I were missionaries down there. Main project with the education sponsorship program, um, and as we were, there, I was trying to kind of look for another project. There was some. We started the time there as a part-time teacher, but just looking for something else to kind of pour my energy into. Local roaster in Texas kind of just came to me and said, "Hey, can you help me get coffee from Honduras? I'd love to kind of feature a Honduran producer from the area that we're doing missions in." So Volunteer Coffee is one of the roasters I've been working with, and we figured out the whole big mess of how you export some coffee back, um, process it all, and get it back to Texas. And that kind of started my venture into coffee. And since then, I started my own company as Honduran Coffee Alliance. And the whole idea is how do we get producers better prices? Because that's what, as I got into it, that's what I kind of, my passion grew in as a Christian, as missionary, the passion to see great need, see kind of injustice, poverty, a country that is suffering through many things. And as I got into the coffee industry, I surprisingly, being in neighborhood communities with the kids we work with, um, I see one of the kids from Honduras behind you there. One of the kids we work with, going to those communities and seeing the poverty and the kind of connection almost to this huge coffee industry, and how, as the coffee industry in Honduras has suffered, so has the poverty grown. That's not, they're not completely related, but there's definitely some connection. And seeing how coffee producers had gone from being a very good industry, producing coffee, you could earn a really good wage, to over the last 3 decades, coffee producers are often driven into poverty by the prices paid for coffee. So I just kind of dove into this saying, how can I find a way to do something different, form a business, a social enterprise, a business that would be still for profit, but for helping these producers connect to buyers, people, roasters mainly, that'd be interested in paying more fair prices.
Mhm. Now, I remember, when the first time that we went to Honduras was like a vision trip to see if our church could do a mission trip. And we visited some women who you were working with to kind of roast the coffee, grind the coffee, and but you've kind of moved now. You work kind of from all aspects of the coffee producing. And I'm here in Des Moines, and so I drink a lot of coffee, but I don't always know the process of it. Can you kind of walk me through how are you involved in the whole process of getting me coffee in America?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because I don't think a lot of people quite understand where it comes from, how it's farmed, processed, and that's as I dug into the coffee industry. I think the biggest thing that gave me a passion was this idea of helping producers get better prices, but just it's an amazingly complex industry, farming to export, import everything. And even then, how farming and all of that goes into better quality coffee. But coffee is grown typically on the higher the altitude, the higher the mountain, the better the coffee. Typically, it's kind of a just generalization. So it's typically grown in the mountains of Honduras, the mountains of many other places in Africa and throughout Central America. And one surprising thing about coffee, different than most other industries, is it's 80% of all coffee is grown by small producers. So, typically corn and a lot of other things, it's grown by many large producers, large landowners, where coffee is a bunch of small farmers, people that don't have that much property processing the coffee. So they send out with their family or small group of people they hire, they pick all these cherries, these coffee cherries, depulp it, process all the skin off of it, go through usually a wash process to process and ferment it, and then dry the coffee, and then it needs to be sorted and cupped, which is the tasting process. Milled finally, and then cleaned for all the defective beans out, exported, imported, and shipped to a roaster who roasts the coffee. And so it's this amazingly complex supply chain, which often results in can result in some really great coffee, can result in some really bad coffee when it's done wrong. But often then there's so many people in the middle of it that the producers often are then getting not much of the actual profit for it.
Sure. Yeah, and we've been together to Honduras, to Uganda, and so as you talk about kind of in Latin America and Africa, those are places where coffee is grown. They're often poorer communities, poorer places. And your heart, it sounds like, is really grown for these local people who are producing coffee, but are poor. So talk about that a little bit, kind of your current project of working with these locals.
Yeah, coffee is pretty much grown exclusively in what they call like the tropics, between a certain area be close to the equator, which is often where a lot of the poorest countries are as well. I just saw a stat like 22 of the 30 poorest countries in the world have coffee as one of their main exports. So in some ways, is this really intriguing opportunity that if you can change how this industry happens, can you really make an impact? I think as Christians, I think God has instilled this in us, and when we are transformed and we give our lives to Christ, God puts in us a desire to see need and have compassion and want to help. And as we think about it, we want to do it in ways that are logical, that aren't just going to be one time. And so for me, like thinking about the big challenge of how do we really help these tough economies, which end up being people that are suffering through this, really make a better way for themselves. So they're working hard. They're working really hard to process coffee and sell coffee. But they often get stuck in these cycles where they get low prices. And so it's a complex industry. Like I said, like one of the aspects of it, it's actually a commodity priced coffee. So I don't know economics as much as some other people could probably explain this a bit better. But so it's traded on the New York Stock Exchange, essentially, or the commodity exchange. And so the prices go up and down like crazy. So, and especially, day to day and year to year. So some years they might be doing all right. And then the last 3 years, for example, it's gone way down. The whole idea is there are a lot of buyers, roasters, particularly we're talking about people that roast coffee and have coffee shops and such, that want specialty coffee, good coffee, and quality coffee, and they're willing to pay better prices for that. And then there's a lot of ones as well that kind of tied into that want to see and make sure that those prices are paying producers better prices. So that's what we try to focus on is how do we work with producers to produce better quality coffee and to connect them to better buyers. And so like one thing we really believe in is like transparency in prices. So we'll tell the producer, we'll tell the roaster exactly who is getting paid every single cent, where it's going to export, import, all that. That's one of the key ways for me is just how to kind of change this is through some opening up some transparency instead of these like secret trades where people don't know what things are being bought at or sold at and such.
I mean, some of the terms that are thrown around, like fair trade or direct trade, or some coffee sellers here in America will tout one of those things and say, we're really good because we do one of those things. Is that something that you guys do? Or do you use those terms or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of the terminology is strange. So fair trade is technically a certification that people can go through that guarantees the producers a minimum price. So I think it's a great thing. Often has nothing to do with quality. So if you're looking for quality coffee, could be that or not, but it does pay the producers at least a solid minimum price, which I think is a good thing. Direct trade is a whole nother, has no definition to it. One roaster kind of invented it and has a good definition of what they do, but then all other roasters try to just adopt it and make up their own definition for it. I really like the idea, the whole idea that roasters work directly with producers and have a relationship with them and understand and grow with it. But saying you do direct trade, what does it really mean is a tricky thing. And that's one thing I've thought about a lot is, what you're kind of getting to is there's a power that consumers have in all of this, that we as consumers that drink coffee have to decide, where do I buy coffee from? And it's a very tricky topic, I think, because the decisions aren't clear. You're trying to understand the numbers and what fair trade and direct trade, the terminology is, it's a hard thing. But I do think there's a power you can have a choice to help producers get out of poverty by buying coffee from people who are trying to do things the right way.
So it seems like there could be a problem, and there is, that you've seen that buyers can demand or pay too little to the producers who are making the coffee. Right? You've seen that a lot, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough because I try not to put the blame on certain. There's so many aspects of the supply chain, from export to import to roasters, and so there's often different steps in there that have, I guess, some blame in some ways. But yeah, there are buyers. Roasters are the ones in the end offering their coffee to end consumers, and they can decide who they buy their coffee from, and whether they ensure that that coffee is getting good prices back to producers or not.
So, as a believer, I believe in the inherent worth of everybody. They're made in the image of God. They're valuable. I want to respect people, have compassion on them, believe in justice, and people should be treated fairly. But it's really easy for me in America just to kind of go to, fill in the blank coffee chain or grocery store, whatever, buy what I want because it has caffeine in it or whatever. How do I choose what is best?
Yeah. So it's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer. I've started a project right now specifically for coffee to basically promote roasters that I have worked with and I know are doing their best to try to work with producers that will give them fair prices, give them good prices. So, my bulk of what I do, my company, Hunter & Coffee Alliance, is trying to sell to green coffee to roasters, and then they try to sell their coffee. So I've never really got involved necessarily directly with consumers in this, but I decided, with everyone being at home right now, interested in buying coffee, interested in supporting locally in a lot of ways, and seeing in some ways the opportunity for, if that movement, that idea could turn into people deciding to support roasters that are helping producers, maybe through this, the roasters that can thrive are the ones that are supporting producers in a good way. So I started this project with that idea. How can we support those roasters, encourage people around us to support those roasters that are doing things the right way? And so I started this. I just launched it a couple days ago, kind of doing it by different areas. So I launched one supporting 3 different Chicago roasters, and then the day before I release this, we'll be supporting a couple Des Moines area roasters that I know are trying to support producers and doing some very interesting things, have some great coffee as well. But I guess going back to your question, it's a tough one in the whole question of what do we do as consumers, because you can extend this question to many other products, clothing or different agricultural products grown in other countries, anything, I guess, imported, I guess even grown. You can ask some of the same questions.
Right.
And I wish there was a better way to be informed as a consumer, because I don't feel like I can, even as a consumer, easily make informed decisions of, is this driving people into poverty or is this paying fair wages? I know I have these chunks of roasters that I personally can vouch for. I know what they're doing. know what they're trying to do at least. So I'm starting with that. But it's a good question, I think, that to start to grapple as Christians is how do we make some decisions to make sure we're not paying unfair wages and driving people into poverty.
And just to kind of make it really clear too, for a guy like me, layman who doesn't know a lot about coffee, like a roaster, they would get your coffee or coffee from wherever that is still, it's green, right? It's not cooked yet, not brown, and they have a machine where they roast it in their shop, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a growing thing right now. Some people try to buy green coffee and roast it at home. But yeah, exactly. What I do is I'm trying to sell green coffee from producers to roasters. I sell it to some like importers wholesale as well, but mainly I'm selling green coffee, which is unroasted coffee, to roasters. Roasters are typically the ones that can see their bags in the grocery stores. They have their coffee shops, and but that's where you begin your coffee from, is from a roaster in the end. And so I'm trying to get my green coffee to them. So that's how I've developed relationships. I know what they're doing because I'm engaging with them about buying Honduran coffee. We're actually right in the middle right now where we're harvest just finished up in Honduras. We have a whole bunch of lots, and we're trying to sell to some of these roasters. So I've kind of been in the middle of engaging with a lot of these roasters and kind of had this idea of how can we support them, because they're struggling through this situation just as a lot of us are.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the situation too, it kind of sounds like you're saying shop local. You shop with local coffee shops, roasters to buy your coffee. And so, as we're filming this, we're in the middle of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. And this doesn't just affect us in America, but it affects people worldwide. So tell me about, how does this affect, planters to roasters to that whole industry of coffee?
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing the impact of this, knowing, first off, many people are getting sick because of this and having the passion for that, but then the economic impact of it. In America, I've seen all these roasters suffering, many just shops, industries, everything. But then that all goes back to all these places that are exporting these things. And in Honduras, for example, many of the countries shut down because there is about 500 or so cases in Honduras. So they've all similarly shut things down, you're shelter in place. So processing this coffee is very tough. Tasting and preparing for export is very hard. So making these connections has been a very extra complicated thing this year. And especially because the roasters are struggling through this time so much, trying to figure out what's their business going to look like after this. So trying to convince them to purchase coffee right now is challenging in some ways. But yeah, it's amazing just the economic impact, how widespread it is because of this, COVID-19 crisis we're passing through.
Yeah, I think about like there's a big coffee chain around me that's, the store itself is closed down. And a lot of coffee shops here, you can't even go inside them because of COVID-19. And so I imagine that really affects local coffee shops, which then affects the coffee producers who don't have it being bought. So it has this kind of trickle down effect, even this time to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's a widespread impact, and we've seen it in the communities we work with, or in our ministries, people not working, agriculture, the demand for the product goes down, and just the logistics of trying to make the connections and such is complicated. And I think we're all trying to figure out life through this new crisis. But hopefully maybe we can also open our eyes to some new ways we can do some things differently through this.
Yeah.
Most of us drink coffee every morning. So thinking about try some different coffees would be an interesting way to think about it.
Just today, I bought 2 more coffee makers. I blame you, Sean.
It's probably fair.
So I really enjoyed it. It's fun to try out different ways of making coffee, cold brew to French press to pour over. And it's more than just hot cup of coffee in the morning. There's certain ways you could try it out. So it's neat.
Yeah, I've become, I think we both become together a little bit of coffee nerds and trying the different flavors and ways that you make coffee. It's fun. It's a fun thing to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's kind of maybe end with this. You got a project going on. What's the best way to get on that project, help, be a part of it?
Yeah. So I started a Facebook page that is Honduran Coffee Alliance that I've been starting to promote this specific project. I've just titled it the Coffee for Good Project, drinking coffee to do something good through this. And then promoting specific roasters. So right now I have, I think, 11 lined up in 5 different specific areas. And so I'll be posting things to promote those roasters. And then, so following that Facebook page, and then as you see those, consider buying some coffee, sharing that, tagging some friends so people can see it. And for any retail or coffee shop, buying gift cards or monthly subscriptions is a great way to support through this time. So any of those ways would be great ways to support this project and get some good coffee.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Sean, for being that connection for us to think through, all aspects of our Christian life, even drinking coffee, and how we can help or hurt somebody, even with the coffee we drink in the morning. So it's good. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for talking this through. It's an interesting industry, and thinking through it, all of these aspects, like I said, as a Christian, and how we can best follow Christ and everything. There's a lot of good, interesting questions brought up. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. As a Christian, it's like I want to have every part of me be glorifying God, even when I drink coffee. So,
yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean. Appreciate you spending some time.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.